Rock Planning Commission to order. You'll call the roll, please.
Chairman Latour.
Here.
Vice Chair Stebbins. Here. Commissioner Berry. Here. Commissioner Brock. Commissioner Bynum.
Here.
Commissioner Hamilton.
Here.
Commissioner Hart.
Here.
Commissioner Haynes.
Here.
Commissioner Rahman.
Here.
Commissioner Thomas.
Here.
And Commissioner Vogel. Here. You have a quorum.
Thank you. You've been provided the minutes. Is there a motion for their approval?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion for the approval of the minutes of the September 12th, 2019 meeting of the
Is there a
Planning Commission.
second?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded to approve the minutes. All in favor, raise your hand. Those opposed? Thank you. Would you take us through the consent agenda, please, sir?
Following is the consent agenda, Little Rock Planning Commission, Planning Rezoning Conditional Use Hearing of October 24th, 2019. Following are the items on consent approval. Item B, file number Z9449, a rezoning from R2 to R3, northeast corner of Lawson, R2 to C3, northeast corner of Lawson Road and Beecham Road. Staff recommends approval of the requested C3 rezoning. Item number 1, Z9457, rezoning from R3 to R4, 1700 South Cedar Street. Staff recommends approval of the requested R4 rezoning. Item number 2, LU 19-1102, a land use plan amendment in the I-430 Planning District located at the northeast corner of Aldersgate Road and West 20th Street from residential low to residential medium. Staff can support the density increase along Aldersgate Road opposite the non-residential use with limited and preferably no direct access to Aldersgate Road. Item 2.1, Z9458, rezoning from R2 to R4, northeast corner of West 20th Street and Aldersgate Road. Staff recommends approval of the requested R4 rezoning subject to the following condition as offered by the applicant. The condition reads, there will be no direct vehicular access from Aldersgate Road to any of the 6 lots. All vehicular access will be from West 20th Street via the platted alley right-of-way along the east property line. Item number 3, LU 19-1103, a land use plan amendment in the I-430 Planning District located at the northeast corner of Canis Road and Embassy Suites Drive from office to commercial. Staff recommends approval. Item 3.1, Z9460, rezoning from O3 and POD to C3, northeast corner of Canis Road and Embassy Suites Drive. Staff recommends approval of the requested C3 rezoning. Item number 4, G23471, exclusive right-of-way and easement abandonment for an undeveloped 30-foot unnamed right-of-way located north of Canis Road, east of Embassy Suites Drive. Staff recommends approval of the exclusive abandonment of the undeveloped unnamed 30-foot right-of-way located between lots 58 and 59, West Highlands subdivision as recorded in Plat Book 1, page 273, with no retention of any easement rights. Item number 5, G23472, Scenic Boulevard right-of-way abandonment located at 55 Scenic Boulevard. Staff recommends approval of the exclusive abandonment of the undeveloped 50-foot Scenic Boulevard right-of-way located within the property located at 55 Scenic Boulevard. Pulaski County Tax Parcel ID 33L01-2000-4600 as recorded in Plat Book 4, page 235, to a point 25 feet north of the south boundary of said tract with no retention of any easement rights subject to the specific requested easements being granted to Entergy and Little Rock Water Reclamation Authority. Finally, item number 6, Z9459, Little Rock Compassion Center Homeless Shelter, conditional use permit, 3821 West Roosevelt Road. Staff recommends approval of the requested CUP subject to compliance with the comments and conditions outlined in sections 4, 5, and 6 of the staff analysis in the agenda staff report. That concludes the consent agenda.
You've heard the consent agenda. Is there a motion for its approval?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve all of the consent agenda items, including all staff comments and conditions.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. All in favor, raise your hand. Those opposed? Consent agenda is approved. If your item was just talked about, you're welcome to stay, but you're equally welcome to go home and have a good evening. So thank you for coming. I was a little derelict. I neglected to introduce, we have a new commission member, Todd Hart. So welcome, Todd. We're glad you're here. Look forward to working with you. All right, if you take us through, the first agenda item is A. And if you'd be kind enough to take us through that, please,
Okay.
sir.
Item number A, file number Z9423, property located at 200 South Louisiana Street. This is the second in Louisiana commercial parking lot conditional use permit. The owner is Second in Louisiana Properties LLC, and the applicant is Thomas Pondell. The applicant is requesting approval of a conditional use permit to allow for the development of a commercial parking lot on the UU zone property at 200 South Louisiana Street. The property is comprised of an entire half-block area located along the west side of South Louisiana between West 2nd and West 3rd Streets. The applicant proposes to construct a new 100-space commercial parking lot, as noted on the site plan that's on your computer screen. It was in the agenda write-up. Commercial buildings which previously existed within the north portion of the property were recently removed, and the south portion of the property previously contained paved parking lot. The applicant is requesting two variances or waivers with the proposed development. Section 36-522 of the city's zoning ordinance requires a minimum street buffer width of 18 feet along West 2nd and West 3rd Street frontages. The proposed plan shows 9-foot buffer landscape strips along these two street frontages. Therefore, the applicant is requesting a variance to allow the reduced street buffers. This plan does, however, conform with the city's landscape ordinance. The city's master street plan classifies West 2nd Street as a minor arterial with 45 feet of right-of-way dedication required. West 2nd Street currently contains 60 feet of right-of-way. At the suggestion of staff, the applicant is requesting a waiver of the additional right-of-way dedication for West 2nd. The existing right-of-way should be sufficient as there are existing buildings within the right-of-way area to the east and west. The applicant did respond to issues raised at subdivision committee by providing a revised site plan to staff. During the process, the application has been deferred twice to allow the applicant to make a couple of additional minor changes, and staff does support all the revisions which have been made to the plan. Staff believes the proposed commercial parking lot located on the UU zone property at 200 South Louisiana Street is an appropriate use for this property, and therefore recommends approval of the requested CUP, including buffer variance and waiver of right-of-way dedication for West 2nd Street, subject to the following conditions. Compliance with the comments and conditions outlined in sections 4, 5, and 6 of the agenda staff report. Any handicap parking spaces on the site must have an accessible route to sidewalks as per ordinance and ADA standards. The site will be limited to the signage shown on the proposed site plan. All signage must be located at least 5 feet back from property lines, and any site lighting must be low level, shielded, and directed into the site.
All right, would the applicant like to come up? And I would note there is one card in opposition to this, so you can have your up to 20 minutes now, or you can take any part of it and defer, and bad choice of word, and wait and hear what the opponent has to say.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commission, Lucas Hargraves on behalf of the applicant. I want to introduce with me as well Van Tilbury, CEO of East Harding Construction Company, who's the contractor on the project, Joe Rantisi with Stevens, and Thomas Pownell, who's the engineer on the project. We'll keep our presentation very brief. I know this issue's come before you a couple of times previously. Thank you for your indulgence. It's pretty straightforward. 100 spot surface parking lot is proposed. I want to note that a third of this property was already a parking lot. We know there's been some discussion about the sequence of events with regards to the demolition and subsequent CUP process. I just want to note that we followed the city's process to the T. Didn't ask for any exemptions, pulled the demo permit, took the buildings down. Van's going to speak to that in just a minute, and have since been pursuing our conditional use permit through the city's process. We have a critical need for parking in the Stevens Tower with our 700 employees. As part of the deal, 100 spots that we currently lease from the Convention and Visitors Bureau and the city's parking deck at 2nd and Main would return to the city. I can tell you in my discussions with the Convention Bureau that those are needed spaces. About 90% of that deck is leased by monthly parkers. On busy convention days, that convention center parking deck is full by 7:30 a.m. sometimes. Yesterday, I just happened to be on Main Street for lunch and tried to park in that deck, and it was full. So the 100 spots that would be freed up for the CVB would help both convention business and daily parkers, a benefit. From a design standpoint, this would be an aesthetically pleasing lot. You can see our lot next to the Capitol Hotel with the heavy landscaping, decorative iron fence, brick columns. It'll be done right. I think at this point I want to ask Van Tilbury to come up briefly and talk about our history in this area of downtown, the conditions of the buildings when they were demolished and why they had to come down, and then finally speak to some of the additional expense that we're going to prepare this site for possible future vertical construction. So with that, Van.
Thank you, Lewis, and thank you to the commissioners for indulging me for a few minutes. To frame my comments, I'd like to share briefly that my company, East Harding Construction, has been renovating buildings and doing infill development downtown for over 30 years. I have not that long, but the company has, starting with some projects very close to this building. About 50% of the work that we do is renovation, and we have a niche in historic renovation projects like the Bobby Roberts Library and the East End Elementary and East End Junior High and other projects like that, the Museum Center, the Museum of Discovery. But we have a 30-year history of working with Stevens Inc., and we've done many projects downtown with Stevens, including the iconic Capitol Hotel, which was a significant investment in the Capitol Hotel parking lot, the building at 5 Main Place, which then became the Little Rock Tech Park. So that project really was owned by and then initiated through or by Stevens Inc., what is now the Tech Park. And we've done many projects in the Stevens Tower. And that brings us to the project here today. When we came onto the team, we did an evaluation of the buildings that were standing there. And we discovered, first of all, they were either vacant or about to be vacated. So if nothing else happened, they were going to be vacant. We evaluated them. There's termite damage, structural damage. We found asbestos. We found lead paint. And the buildings were not ADA compliant. So they'd been kind of grandfathered in over time. So with those issues, the decision was made that, they're not really feasible to renovate, and they had no historical significance. So following the city process, the decision was made to take them down, and that's what we did. We received the demo permit and the staff support. We carefully demoed the buildings. We talked to all the neighbors. We've got East End across the street, right? So we're being real careful about what we're doing. But then we took it further. At Stevens' request, we demoed out the basements and all the concrete footings. We wanted to get this site structurally stable for future vertical building construction. So on the south end, where the parking lot was already existing, we had to go down 8 feet below grade to get down to suitable soil, and then bring those soils back up in lifts and have engineers measure it and all of that so that it's ready for vertical construction in the future. The building that was on the north end at 2nd and Main, when we took its slab out, it was built on top of rubble. So the previous building had burned, and they had just pushed it in. And there was brick and concrete, and there were tree stumps and debris under that building. So we took all that out at considerable expense, and then brought all that back up in lifts with suitable materials, so that when market conditions are right, this parking lot can be developed into a vertical building. And I know that's, Stevens has a history of doing that. and they invested significantly to prepare the subgrade for vertical construction in the future. Could have saved a lot of money just by putting in a surface lot, but that's not what happened. So the site is prepared for future vertical construction when the market conditions are right, and as we move into construction, we'll do exactly what Lucas said. It's going to be a very attractive parking lot and aesthetically pleasing as a surface lot would go. But the one thing I'd like you to remember, they were not suitable for redevelopment, and there's been significant expense below grade to prepare it for future vertical construction. So happy to field any questions or turn it back over to Lucas. Thank you.
Just a comment or two, and then we'll turn it over to the opposition. Van touched on the market conditions, and I will note that we do have retail space listed currently in the Stevens building that we've not been able to lease. There are also other properties listed between Markham and Second, retail uses that are currently for lease. And as Van mentioned, the market conditions are such at present, just would not support that type of development on this property. And that's evidenced by the current listings. So with that, I think we'll hear from the opposition and be ready to answer any of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth Bell.
I'm sorry I'm the only opposition, but I'm not unaccustomed to that situation. I'm Ruth Bell with the League of Women Voters, and we have concerns about adding more parking lots in a UU district. Purpose of the UU zoning is to facilitate pedestrian traffic, encourage retail business activity, and provide an livable urban environment. Quite exactly what years ago people talked about when they were selling the city on the River Market area. And I have to say, no matter how they're landscaped, when you've seen one parking lot, you've seen them all. And they're just not things of beauty, whether empty or full of cars. And even the most intensively landscaped parking lots on the boundaries, they plant lots of nice bushes, but they keep cutting them down about that tall. So they don't do much toward hiding all the cars in the interior of those lots. We're not negative about parking lots. We drive cars too. However, it may be news to Stevens Inc., but it is possible to build parking decks that both meet the requirements of a UU district, encourage pedestrian traffic and retail activity in a pleasant urban environment, and still have parking. And that is by building parking decks they do in some other cities, such as Santa Fe, New Mexico, where you have retail on the ground floor, where you don't have the ramps taking you in and out of the parking deck, and they look just like stores, because that's what they are. And I was really shocked during an initial visit to Santa Fe to discover that what I was admiring and thinking, gee, we need to go back as we drove along and check on some of those shops and look up higher and see it was really the bottom of a parking deck. Surely Stevens Inc., with their tradition of investing in the city and the city's future, would be perfectly happy to forget about a ugly parking lot which discourages pedestrian traffic between the Main Street River Market area and other areas further west, and put up a parking deck appropriate to UU standards. Also, I would be happier with the commitments from my friend. I've known him since he was on the planning commission. That was a long time ago. And ask that if Stevens Inc. is so concerned about providing good footings for a building on that site, they might also be willing to put on a timeline and say, yes, we could have this parking lot, and in 5 years, 7 years, or 3 years, we will put a peachy keen new building there, office building that will complement the parking lot. For all those reasons, the league does not like this application, and we hope you will reject it. Thank you.
Before Mr. Hargraves comes back, I just want to make one comment. And, pardon me. Pardon me. And that comment is, there are really two questions that you brought up. One is, what do you do with this thing today? And the other is, how do you do parking downtown with decks and flowers and shops? We're here to talk about this thing today. Now, we will talk about the other, but you keep in mind, we have to look at this particular project right now. Secondly, I don't think you could ask them to amend their application to change to put any timeline in. We have to deal with the project today at the application as it is today.
That's a
And
good.
I appreciate the overriding problem.
That's a good sermon, which I have heard preached to a great many people in my years before you. But it doesn't change the fact that those are issues that might enter your minds as you consider this application. It is not consistent with a UU district. It is not consistent with connecting the office buildings that include county office building, this building, Robinson Auditorium, the Old State House Museum, and a number of other office buildings besides Stephen Inc.'s building, with areas closer along Broadway, and enable everybody to
And
have.
I'll let them answer that, but my point is, that's not germane in the short run to the question of this project.
Okay, I'm sorry you heard my thoughts. Do what you need to do.
Thank you.
Just a couple of things to note. Obviously, we have momentum on Main Street. That's something I think we're all excited about. It wasn't very long ago that Main Street was desolate. Even 5 years ago, if you looked at what was happening on Main Street and were to fast forward to today, most people wouldn't believe the activity. So things are happening. But we do have to deal with the realities of the market conditions and demand. And we don't know exactly when the conditions are going to be right for the type of project that Van outlined earlier. But I think everyone in this room is hoping that happens, and hoping it happens just as soon as possible. We don't think this will discourage downtown activity or pedestrian traffic. Again, I want to point out that this is going to free up 100 spaces in the city's deck at 2nd and Main, which will make available spaces desperately needed for people that want to come downtown and shop. So I just wanted to point out those two things. And with that, I think we'd just like to be available to any questions the commission has, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioners, any questions? Thank you. No, I'm sorry.
That's okay. So I was at the subdivision committee when this came before technical review, and I'm trying to remember the timeline. Even before it got to the first hearing, I was biking by the property one afternoon, and the property was down. So it's just something I've never experienced before, where an applicant asked for something, zoning, and tore a building down before it happened. So what happened between the application made and your process of tearing it down, and then actually us being able to have a public discussion about this application?
I can speak to that. The buildings were assessed. The buildings were in disrepair with the issues that I mentioned previously, and not available or feasible to rehabilitate. And we made application for demolition permit that was approved, and with that approval, moved into the demolition process. The intent was not to circumvent this commission or anything like that. The intent was we've done an evaluation. These are not, they're going to be vacant. They're not really feasible to renovate, and we received a demo permit and followed through with that.
What you had the right to do, I understand that. It just seemed like you got ahead of the permitting process for zoning. It was very sudden. I have another question for staff, but go ahead, Commissioner.
I too was in that subdivision meeting and remember explicitly thinking that this is a good opportunity for a corporate citizen downtown to reinvest in the area down there. And I think that's what we as a commission have to remember is we want to see development. We want to see corporate citizens do more and have it be a conducive environment for them to invest. And, you know, I was a little taken aback too when I saw it was already down, but, you know, it's their property and they can do as they wish, you know, and then come afterwards and ask for a CUP. And obviously, I think history will speak for itself, but I think they'll do a good job once the opportunity is there to invest in the downtown. So I think it's our opportunity to.
Commissioner Thomas had a question, I think.
I went by that area as well, and it seems the downtown River Market area is kind of turning into just a lot of big buildings, and especially parking is popping up everywhere. Smaller areas, bigger areas, and large constructions as this one is proposed. And so I'm really concerned about, like, you know, losing our natural, you know, visibility downtown to attract, like, when we have, I mean, we're the natural state. So that when we have tourists and things come, and they're bombarded with just seeing a lot of huge parking structures when we're trying to get foot traffic down there. If we have retail shops and things that do become available downtown, we want that foot traffic to increase that market value. So I'm concerned about green space down there and retail as well. So I'm not sure if I'm in support of this.
I can speak to some of that. Just the track record of Stevens Inc. in Central Arkansas, I think goes without saying when you consider Episcopal Collegiate School and the Jack Stevens Center and the investment at UAMS and the Dickey Stevens Ballpark. Stevens Inc. owned the land where the River Market stands today. And, you know, that was 20 plus years ago, a real that was a real risky venture to try to create this river market, and we've seen the success. So after the river market is successful, the attention turns to Main Street, and I would attribute Stevens Inc. and their investment in the building, the historic building at 5 Main Place, that was then leased to 2 state tenants, that then became the catalyst for what is now the Little Rock Tech Park. You know, so Stevens Inc. used to be in that building on Main Street. That was their corporate headquarters, and then held that building for a long time, and then reinvested millions of dollars for the tenants. And then that was the catalyst for what is now the Tech Park, which has been a catalyst for Main Street redevelopment. And so now you move to this site that's prepared for vertical construction, but you've got to wait until the market, I mean, there are economics here, so you got to wait until the market conditions are right when you know that vertical construction makes sense before you make that investment. And we see Stevens investments all over our community. In terms of green space, I don't know how to address that with this particular space. You know, I think, you know, this group in downtown, green space redevelopment plan, we've got the Riverfront Park, and, you know, if 430 moves through, we pick up 17 acres. And I'll also add that there's a significant investment in the Art Center at MacArthur Park where there is designated green space. And there's a real effort to connect the river market through to MacArthur Park. So, I mean, it's a complex issue.
Commissioner Stebbins has a comment.
I haven't seen any elevations, but will it be similar to the way the parking, speaking to Ms. Bell's point of no parking lot's beautiful? Well, you know, the one that's around the Capitol Hotel, it looks like the secret garden to me because, I mean, it's got, you know, iron fixtures around it and shrubs and it, you know, kind of opens up in between those buildings. So, I mean, will it be similar to what's around the Capitol Hotel?
Yes, it will.
Anybody else? Commissioner Hart?
I guess I have a little bit different view with respect to parking downtown. I used to try to lease space downtown, and thankfully I'm not in the business of doing that anymore. But I can tell you that the biggest issue that we had in leasing space downtown, it was not the commute, it was not affordability, and it certainly wasn't availability. It always came down to parking. And parking decks are great, but the reality is it cost about $20,000 per space to build a vertical parking deck. And so in order to make that work, you then begin to charge people $50, $60, $70, $80 per space per month. And so those types of costs often kill deals when they're downtown. So I always felt like when I was leasing space in downtown Little Rock, if we had more surface parking that wasn't as costly and that was available to the public, I realize yours will be private parking, but you're doing that in lieu of you're giving back space that can be used by the public. I always felt like that would be a benefit to downtown. And so I get it. We all have this image that we want all the high rises lining all of our streets downtown, and that's great, and that's New York and Chicago and other major cities. And sometimes we see a parking lot on the corner, a surface lot, and there's not much attractive about that. However, if I could point out one thing that we need downtown, it is more affordable parking, more opportunities for people to park their employees. Because you're faced with one of two issues when you talk about locating your business downtown. You're either going to ask your employee to pay for their parking, or the employer is going to pick up that cost. And either way, when parking is free in the western part of our town and in the midtown, downtown just hasn't been attractive enough in the past. So that, coupled with the fact that I don't think Stevens has ever done anything halfway. I think if there is anyone who would invest in making a surface parking lot look attractive and secure and fit in downtown, Stevens is the one who could get that done. So I tend to support what you're bringing forth, because I think more affordable parking is better for downtown. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Berry?
Yeah. Thank you, Commissioner Hart. I did have some questions of staff, but before I do that, I just want to say that it's a great discussion about what expectations should be for parking downtown. Parking is a challenge. I'm not sure downtown will ever compete with suburban parking lots. They are free, they're affordable. I think for later discussion, the city has to step up and say, what can the city do to find parking solutions so we don't end up with surface parking says we've lost the balance. Surface parking is winning downtown, and I'm not sure that's a good look. Now, having said that, a question for staff, and then I would like to bring up the UU zoning ordinance up on the screen. Staff, correct me if I'm right, if I'm explaining this incorrectly. When MAPCO came before us 5 years ago at 3rd and Broadway, the staff opposed that as being an inappropriate use and not sensitive enough to the development in the downtown core. The planning commission agreed, denied it. I believe it went to the city board, and the city board denied that for the same reasons. I'm not sure why Second Louisiana is less worthy of our affections than Third and Broadway, and as will be evidenced if Gale Oil will come up again. So I'm trying to look for consistency and precedent and continuity, and I'm not finding that, which leads me to more discussion about really what is a reasonable downtown development plan. We don't have that. Could you bring up did I describe that correctly? What happened with the MAPCO at 3rd and Broadway? As far as that process, the zoning application. I know that was before Jamie was here.
Third and Gaines. Yeah, I think, Chairman Berry, because of the pooled application that come for the property that is at 3rd and Broadway, that was going to be there, it's different. That's one that's been pooled that is not being heard.
No, I'm speaking of the one, the MAPCO.
Okay.
That was at 3rd and Broadway, I'm pretty sure. Are you sure it's 3rd and Gaines? Well, anyhow, I'm going to block off. But the process I described, I think, was the city staff opposed it, the planning commission opposed it, and so did the city board. So I'm comparing and contrasting why that's a different spot and more sensitive than what we're doing at Second Louisiana. So I would like, Staff Monty, would you read the first highlighted section here of the general purpose and intent of the UU Urban Use District? If you can read it.
Well, I don't have a computer screen in front of me.
Well, I'll read it then, okay. Because I do have it somewhere. I know, but I can't read it. Because it ain't coming across very well.
Chairman, I think I can read that from the screen if you.
Okay, go ahead and read it. Yeah, okay.
It reads as, the general purpose and intent of the urban use district is, the urban use district established by this chapter is designed to assure the continuation of development consistent with the traditional urban form. The urban use district is designed to help create a compact, dense, distinguishable core area. The district is established in order to provide for an urban form allowing mid-rise and high-rise structures. This district is to provide for the office, civic, and business core of the city. Structures within the urban use district are encouraged to provide multiple uses within the same structure. The ground or street level of structures should include street-oriented activity and pedestrian amenities. The resulting area is to be pedestrian, urban-oriented.
Okay. Thank you. Would you, Walter, move down the ordinance to, okay, stop there. So read the one at item B, parking lot, surface parking. I'll read it. Surface parking is to be located behind or adjacent to a structure, never between the building and an abutting street. And I think I know what that was really to apply to small redevelopments. It's ambiguous whether it applies to this or not, technically. So all that to say, sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm finishing, is there are no villains here. I just think we dropped a stitch. And I've never encountered a situation where someone bought a property that wasn't contingent on zoning before they demolished. But in my mind, it violates the spirit of the UU zoning district and arguably technically violates this item section B. Having said that, I can't support it, but I really am more interested in some broader solutions for parking challenges, and you'll have to excuse me. It's just, this is something I'm not going to get behind. Anyhow, thank you.
Is that a question for staff or
No,
statement?
it's over with. I just wanted to know about the Third and Gaines, why that was a contrasting piece of
Any other comments? If not, a motion would be in order.
Mr. Chairman, I move for the approval of item A, including all staff comments and conditions.
Is there a second? Any other discussion? Hearing none, if you're in favor of the motion, raise your hand. Thank you. If you get a count. If you're opposed, raise yours. There you go.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you for your time.
And I would note, even though I gave a nice sermon to Ruth, and I would note, yes, there is a larger problem, and for the commission's benefit, there will be an informal meeting at noon on the 7th. The place to be determined. And I expect Chairman, Commissioner Barry and I will probably end up splitting lunch for you. But the topic will be parking. So you didn't fall on deaf ears at all, Ms. Bell, so thank you. Okay, item 7, staff. Bylaws. We do have one card in, not necessarily opposition, but in comment, so whenever that would be appropriate.
Chairman, we presented this at the last commission meeting for everybody to look at and send in comments, and we did receive some. So with your permission, I would like to hear from Ms. Bell, and then also like to hear, staff would like to hear from all the commissioners that have any comments to kind of go through it. I would like to postpone any type of vote today until the next planning commission, due to that even at that time we need to present any comments or changes that we are proposed to the city attorney's office for their legal review and a final presentation to the commission. So with that.
Okay, Ms. Bell?
Me again? Okay. I have to find the other copy.
You pull that mic down just, pull the microphone down just a little.
You mean you couldn't hear me? That's really bad. Let me see. I'm still looking for my, well, where did I put it? Okay. There's a lot of cleanup in this, which is fine. And a lot of putting things in the bylaws that have developed over the past years and not been perhaps adequately spelled out in the bylaws since they were last revised. And I have no problems with those items. I actually have 3 areas that I have problems with, and let's take the easier ones first. And those deal with, I wish I knew what page it was, page 8 and page 6. Let's go to page 6 of your bylaws. And there's under conduct of business A1, the chairman announces all citizen communication cards must be submitted prior to roll call. Well, considering that anybody hardly ever gives you citizen communication, this is kind of, well, we've got to cover all bases, and I'm okay with that. But it's really unrealistic to expect that people who come to make a citizen communication have to come at the beginning of a meeting that, although your last few meetings have been short, have sometimes lasted for hours and hours and hours. And once or twice has left my husband thinking I'd eloped with somebody on the board. It's really unrealistic to expect that people who live in our 24/7 world were to get here at 4 p.m. If you have a small child, you have to arrange to have somebody there to make sure they're picked up at school or somebody at home when they're home.
I just ask you a question? We talk about 2 things here. Citizen communication is the item that's always last on the agenda.
I know.
Okay.
And
That does not require a green card, to my knowledge.
Well, what's being proposed is if they got to put the card in for citizen communication before the meeting begins.
I think the intent here, and you raise a good point that we probably ought to reword it, the intent here is that if you want to speak on an item, you have to fill out a green card. Now, whether that should be at the
That's not what this said. That's what I
I
thought it,
understand, that's why I'm asking.
I have no this is just, you don't have much citizen communication now, but you're going to kill it dead if somebody has to get here at 4 in order to put in a card for citizen communication. And also, it's kind of inconsistent because over on page, I think it's 8, it talks about, at the very top of that page, once an item is voted within the consent agenda, it is approved, and no further discussion on that item is allowed, except during citizen communication. But if they have to sign up for citizen communication before the meeting begins, how do they know they need to sign up for citizen communication if the consent agenda hasn't been passed yet?
Good point.
No, I think great point, Ms. Bell, or Attorney Bell, I think it is now. What is it?
I think the issue is we need to change the name of the green cards from citizen communication, which is being confused with the public's opportunity to speak before the board at the end of the agenda meeting. So what we'll do is find a good name for the green cards. They will not be citizen communication cards.
Okay.
But now, the purpose of having the green cards submitted before the consent agenda is read is because you have to have consistency.
I know.
Okay, thank you.
But this is
And he
just,
said what I was trying to say, so.
yeah, okay, but now let's get to the nitty-gritty, which, from my point of view, and that's page 2, which does away with your committees. And I really would like to hear, before I tell you what I think about it, why did you all decide to do away with your standing committees?
We'll defer to the legal for that.
Really wasn't a decision made by the city attorney. I'll let Jamie handle that one.
Well, at first we need to go back to the original, the ordinance that they revised in 1996. That I went and pulled and looked at today. Dana found the ordinance for us and looked at, and I looked at it previously, but it was, at one time, they actually used to have a vote at the subdivision committee to pass it on to the planning commission, and that went away in 96, I believe, was that the deal. And at that time, essentially, you're still just hearing the applicant. So, but it still can go to the planning commission. So the applicant, it's not mandatory that they be at the subdivision committee meeting. Yeah. And so what we have is we have a meeting that we sit there and we go over essentially all of staff's comments, that's on there. And when that all got set up, we don't have the technology that we have today. And we can do that and send everything to the commissioners, to all of them, to have that. So the intent is not to do away with that type of meeting, but instead of having the commissioners there at that meeting, in which when you have more than, or 2 or more, it needs to be recorded, we're going to have a technical staff meeting with the applicants, go over their, all the comments and everything, and then send all of that at that meeting time to the commissioners, for review. So they will all be involved at that time rather than just either the 2 or 3 or 4 that, come to that meeting. All of them will be informed of those comments at that time.
Okay, so you need to tell me twice. I forgot to put my ears in before I dashed out here to save the world. What you are saying is you would still have this meeting, which is obviously a good meeting to have, a technical review meeting. And you will somehow, are you going to put it in writing, live stream it, tape it, and get all that to all of you commissioners? Is that what you said?
Yeah, anything that is met with like staff is not required to be recorded or taped. It is just a presentation of comments.
Okay, so you've lost me. How are you going to let the commissions who is not there know what happened at that meeting except to say what's already in the write-up.
Well, that's what we do. We take minutes of the write-up that we have that we presented at that subdivision, committee right now, and which we would do the same, but we would email it out or put it on a online document forms that the commissioners have access to.
But what are you putting in there? Are you putting in the back and forth, the points of view, or are you just doing as is in the current write-up for the application, where it's a summary of the subdivision meeting, including what was requested of the applicant?
We'd be doing a summary.
It will be no different then.
No.
That doesn't sound like an improvement to me.
The only difference in your meeting is you won't have commissioners sitting at the meeting.
What?
You won't have commissioners sitting in the meeting at the table as you have now. Otherwise, it'll be the same meeting, staff and the applicants and the public.
I'm okay with staff and applicant meeting and working things out by the city's requirements. What I'm not really, if we're going to take commissioner participation out of it, how are you going to let you all know, since apparently 1+ of this theoretically is that all of you will know so much more? It's not like they're going to be able to watch what's happening, I guess. It's not like you're going to give them a detailed summary of what happened.
Well, they will get the write-up and all the comments that we have, from that meeting.
But you just said that was going to be the same as what's in the existing write-ups we get.
Well, if you've ever attended those meetings, what the comments are is the majority of them is just going through and talking about what the comments are and asking questions if they understand and trying to explain the items of our code, where we've made those comments.
I'm still lost. Okay.
I think the big issue is at these subcommittee meetings, not all the commissioners are there. Yeah. And on top of that, the applicant is usually spending most of the time reviewing the technical documents with the staff. Right. So the commissioners who are there have limited interaction with the applicant about what they're needing to do. Staff is basically making them aware of what they need to do, be it turn in their notifications. I think the staff will do just fine getting all of the information to all the commissioners after they've had a review of what the applicant needs to do. And then any commissioner who takes time to read the information, and if they have questions, they can go back to staff. That's basically what the committee meeting is doing.
I've got all that,
but for
Robbie.
only half of the
Is that
commissioners.
not what we get in our packet?
But what's the difference between, I'm not seeing how the report that you would do to the commission under this new version would be any different than what is a very short summary in your reports to the commission now. What am I missing?
That's essentially what it is. They just are reading all of that to the applicant. And if the commissioner who's on the subcommittee wants to discuss it,
yeah,
then they do.
Could I join in? I hate for you to be alone on this. It's an item of interest, and actually, the commissioner described that process well. It's become redundant. Not many commissioners come to it because it's like, being stationed in Greenland as an Army sergeant or something. But I enjoy it, and I'm very tactile, and I'm a dinosaur because I still read my, morning newspaper as a hard copy. So my main question is the only benefit of this subdivision committee meeting, because no one in public is allowed to talk. I mean, it's strictly a technical review, is that the staff has some leverage if the applicant sees the commissioners there and they're saying, you need to do this and you need to do that, and in the presence of commissioners. So that's the benefit of that. The question is it really still a benefit compared to the need for having the committee? I don't know. I mean, I'm curious how other cities are handling technical reviews, because do you know how that's handled in other communities?
Yeah, I can tell you from multiple states that I've been in, they've had reviews with staff as far as around the table. You come in, you sit down, and you go over your application with all the staff members, reviewing all the comments. There's other municipalities that doesn't even happen. You go over, you get your comments, and then if you have any questions, you call staff and they go over it, and then your next meeting would be at the public meeting or the planning commission. I believe that there does need to be a meeting, and I've expressed that of meeting with the applicant and going through all that, the technical stuff and meeting with them, and that's not something that we're looking to remove. And I do want to make a point that, Chairman Barry, Commissioner Barry, you did say that, it's good for them to see the commissioners there to actually push this application forward. That still can happen at a technical review. It can be put in the ordinances, and that's what we're looking through right now in revising of they have to be at that technical review if we choose to put it in an ordinance. We do not have it now, for that. That's why I say the subdivision committee is not mandatory.
I think it should be important for the applicant
Yes,
to be
and
at
I
the
think
review.
it is.
It's unfortunate when they don't come and they show up at the meeting and you're like, well, we didn't get a chance to talk about this.
And that's all part of streamlining some of this process. We need to choose what is, if they're going to be there, what we need to go over and mandatory to have, like at that meeting, to present to us. So if there's items that we need to see in a timely manner before we present to the commission, if that's not at that meeting,
Right.
then they need to be deferred, to the next meeting.
And I'm all good trying this change, because there is no public participation element in this at all, Ruth, and there never has been, even when I was an intern and they voted on this. So you're not losing that. I just like looking applicants in the eye and see who they are, but that's just me. So I'd be glad to try the electronic version, see how that goes. If we have problems with it, we always can come back and propose changes, but it seems like a logical way to go.
And I'd also want to point out that the commission, by ordinance, has a right to set up committees and, do reports and studies. And even if these are removed from the bylaws, it does not mean that at a later date, the commission can look at what committees that needs to be had, regardless of this bylaws, because it's also in the ordinance. We're looking to pull them out because you already have that right to do that. It does not need to be duplicated.
Can I make one more comment?
Sure.
Okay. As you're well aware, I live in two places here and an agricultural county in Illinois for all practical purposes. I follow their planning and zoning structure very carefully. And they have this kind of structure where applications go to a technical committee, which is what you're talking about, and then go to a version of the planning commission. And more often than you would think, the technical committee would say, oh, this is okay with a few minor suggestions. And then it would get to the citizen level, and all hell would break loose, because what the technical people were looking at did not coincide with what the people who have to answer to the other people who live in the community were interested in. And so in that sense, it seemed to me having the commissioners there when the technical people were working enabled a smoother transition to the full commission.
Did you not see that just tonight? The technical staff had it on consent agenda a couple of months ago. And because some of the commissioners had concerns about the project above and beyond the thickness of the asphalt and the height of the shrubs and whatnot, it came back. So that's the same way here.
Okay, now that's all my comments on the.
Thank you. Anybody else comments on anything?
Yes. Thank you, Chair. No, I just had two more items of interest, and whether or not it seems to me we ought to codify the practice. If an item's been fully discussed in a previous meeting and is deferred, we have, at the urging of staff, asked the chair to say it's a 10-minute ruling on either side. So I didn't know if that needs to be codified or not. You know, someone could challenge us and say, well, I'm sorry, you shouldn't be able to apply that rule. It's not in your bylaws. So I would ask staff to consider that. And the only other thing I have is it comes from my philosophy of managing for the norm and not the exception, is could you go to page no, I'm looking if I'm on the right page yet. Yeah. Article 5B8 on page 8. So I had my email and my communication to you already. So page 8 and item 8. And I had shared suggested language with the chair and the staff, and I'll share it with you. This particular version's, if you can, would you go ahead and read that for someone? Read that for the rest of the commissioners if they can't. Item 8, rebuttals or any interruptions shall not be permitted. The one
that's proposed right now, or the one that you was looking to?
No, the one on the screen. Go ahead and read
Okay,
it.
one on the screen says rebuttals or any interruptions shall not be permitted. Any violation of this rule will result in a single warning, and then the citizen is subject to ejection from the public meeting.
Okay. So I just had a reaction. I thought that was a little harsh and punitive. I think interruptions are not allowed, you know, and uncivil behavior and abusive behavior should not. My concern is if someone has asked, was not here didn't have a card, or says I got something pertinent to add, it should be up to the chair to decide this. My language, I'll share this with you, and if we talk about it again, you'll have it. It says interruptions are not allowed. Rebuttals by parties other than applicant with or without a signed green card are generally not allowed except at the discretion of the chair, who deems such rebuttals to be material and pertinent to the justice of the process and considerations by commissioners. And I think there will be some times where the chair is going to have some judgment, like we did at the Airbnb, whether or not a gentleman who was late after consent agenda did not submit a card. And and we have that section, by the way, at the end of the bylaws saying these are informal meetings in some respects, except for the orderly conduct. But it's up to the chair to deem that justice be served for all. So that's my only thought on that. And staff may have a different view, and other commissioners. I thought that language needed to be reworked.
All of these revisions right now are very fluid, and I agree with you that there needs to be wide discretion. The problem that we have with discretion, you have to weigh that with due process and equal protection. And with the more discretion you have, the more risk we are at violating someone's due process rights or treating someone unequally. But it's a balance, and we can do that. And I will look at your language and present it to the city attorney.
I just, I work in a business where we like to eliminate most risk and mitigate risk, but we don't eliminate all risk because we've got to bring a product to the people. So I just think there has to be some reasonableness there. I really trust the judgment of the chair. If someone, and I've seen, in practice, I've seen the chair will either say, no, you shouldn't come, or the chair will say, yep, go ahead, let's hear what you have to say. And I'm not sure.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure we want to totally eliminate that discretion. Thank you for your comments, though. That's.
Anybody else? I would note that the November 7th meeting will be at noon. It will be at the chamber. I got confirmation of that we reserved a room. So it'll be at the Little Rock Chamber of Commerce next to the Main Street Bridge at noon. And we take requests for whatever you might want to eat. And Craig and/or I will host it. And look forward to it. Now, without any green cards at all, is there any citizen communication? Hearing none, is a motion to adjourn?
Move we adjourn.
So moved.